Hey, this is Gayle from BERNINA of Naperville, and you have tuned in to our introduction video on our BERNINA of Naperville Embroidery Sampler 2 project. So this video is block one, introduction in block one, to our year-long project where we're gonna make a show-stopping quilt from start to finish. It's a quilt-as-you-go project. You might remember our other embroidery sampler that we did that, you know, some of you, the feedback was that that was the master program and you would kind of like to just do graduate school first. So this one, we are going to explore some different techniques in this one that you're sure to love. And I love that we're working with solids this time because it gives us more opportunity to use a base for some playtime with our embroidery, with our machine quilting, with our quilting in the hoop, and all kinds of other things like that. So we've kitted this. And this kit is going to come with everything you need. It's bright, it's colorful, it's got the thread, it's all organized, and hopefully it will speak to you. It also comes with two design collections this time, and those are from our friends at embroideryonline.com or OESD, and it is you'll love it. It's a treat. So let's just roll up our sleeves and get down to it.
I'm going to be going through the handout to kind of explain to you what this is and help you get a visual. So as you can see here, there are 9 blocks, and each of those larger blocks are, they measure about 20.5 inches before they get sashed into the quilt. But each one is color blocked with a different colorway. And each one of these is actually stitched and flipped right in the embroidery hoop. Now, that might not make any sense to you right now, but don't worry, we're going to get through that. So let's first talk about the supplies. So there is a supply list on the handout, and of course the handout is going to arrive to you each month, because we are going to do a monthly video for this, and we are also going to do a monthly session in the store if you are local to Naperville, Illinois. And as a reminder, Naperville, Illinois is just outside of Chicago. So in that kit, there is the threads, and there are 12 of them that we've picked out. And I have suggestions each month, but if you decide that you want to stitch something out in a different color, that's totally cool. There's also the fabric, the backing, the sashing, and then the designs to make it. So we're working with 2 design CDs. It's Divine Flowers and Vines and Piece to Perfection. Now, I also realize that a lot of you do not have CD-ROM drives in your computers, so we also will have links once you purchase the kit. We will have links to those designs digitally for you, and that way you won't have to go futzing around to try to find a CD-ROM drive. Each month, we're going to introduce a little bit of new techniques or new products to try, but for month 1, we're going to be using a medium weight tearaway stabilizer. It is a little bit different than what OESD is suggesting, but it's okay. We're kind of using our pieces a little bit different than they intended. Then hoops of your choice. I would say go with the biggest hoop or the largest hoop that you have, because it does save a little bit of stabilizer to actually hoop 2 blocks at one time. But if you're new, there's nothing wrong with doing each of these little blocks in one hoop. And I'll explain, because our 20.5 inch big blocks are made up of 16 smaller, around 5.5 inches. Quilting needles, size 90, there's a lot of seams in these. You're going to need embroidery needles as well to stitch it out. Bobbin thread for the actual embroidery part. Those are the Divine Flowers and Vines portion. But you're also going to need regular sewing thread to sew the blocks, stitch and flip them together, as well as sewing all of the little 16 5.5 inch blocks together, and then of course quilting thread and things like that. Now, we did not include batting in the kit, but I recommend a low loft like bamboo or Quilter's Dream Select. You're going to need a nice steam iron, some small embroidery snips, rotary cutter mat and rulers. I recommend a 6 by 24 inch, a 6.5 inch square, and a 20.5 inch square. Now, Also, fair warning, we carry the 20.5-inch squares at the store, but if you are from a distance and you need something shipped, that is an item that we don't ship. It's just awkward and weird to ship, and it usually costs a lot, so pick that up at your local quilt store. Quilting accessories that we need, well, free motion quilting feet like the Bernina stitch regulator. I also like the 73 micro stippling foot. We are going to do ruler work this month, so you're going to want to make sure you have either the 72 ruler work foot or the 72S. The S stands for a slit, and that one has a little slit to tuck the thread under the foot. Ruler work foot with rulers, gloves for gripping, supreme slider if needed. And of course, if you don't have a Bernina, then you would just need the appropriate free motion feet and supplies for your brand. So the designs, let's have a look at these. Piece to Perfection, that is our stitch and flip blocks. So this collection is meant to make a quilt from start to finish in your embroidery hoop. And it's almost like it's stitch and flip, but those of you that might have done some paper piecing, you might consider that this is a little bit like paper piecing in the hoop, only the blocks aren't quite as difficult as some paper piecing blocks you might have done. If you look in the top right corner there, you can see that's the picture from OESD, and you can see this shiny bit on their stabilizer. Well, they're using Ultra Clean and Tear Plus, which is a tearaway stabilizer with a little bit of fusible on. This technique didn't work out very well for me when I did a test go, so I am going to be using just regular medium weight stabilizer, but you know what, there might be other blocks during this adventure where we can, you know, kind of experiment with some others. Also on the Piece to Perfection designs, there are quilting designs. There are edge-to-edge designs and little motif pieces, and we're going to be using those for our quilt in the hoop blocks. And not everything is a quilt in the hoop. I kind of mixed it up a little bit, but we will for sure be using those. Divine Flowers and Vines are our more traditional embroidered element, and this collection of designs, they work well together to create wreaths, arrays, and frames. And there is a little bit of an added touch here with these. These designs are kind of like padded satin stitching, and you can cut those and get like a little chenilled look to it. And there's even a chart in the PDF instructions to be able to show you where their recommendations to clip those. I talked a little bit about stabilizer. There are many choices because we are going to be adding the vines. If you were just doing this project only stitch and flipping the blocks and not adding embroidery at the end, lightweight would be perfectly fine. But because we are adding an element of a little bit heavier embroidery, we recommend the medium tearaway to fit your largest hoop. And they come in 20-inch by 10 yards, 15-inch by 10 yards, and 10-inch by 10 yards. The hoops, for Bernina, there is a mega hoop that fits the 5 series through the 8 series. There's a maxi hoop that fits the 7 and 8 series, and then there's the jumbo hoop that fits the 8 series. The larger hoops are a little bit nicer to have if you want to build 2 blocks per hoop. So if you do not have a Bernina, you want to make sure if you want to put 2 hoops and build those together in the same hoop, that you need at least a 6.5 by 12-inch size hoop. Before we get into anything, it's always good to do some practice. So let's talk about some of these techniques. We're going to be stitching without thread. We're going to be playing with stabilizers. We're going to do stitch and flip. We're going to edit embroidery designs. At first, we're going to do that just in the embroidery machine, but then as we do other blocks, we will branch out and use some embroidery software. We're going to quilt as you go. We're going to quilt in the hoop, and we're going to quilt from the back. So stitching without thread is the first thing that we need to do when we start either our practice block, that you are going to do a practice block. So that requires turning off the upper thread sensor. And all we're doing with this is we're just perforating the stabilizer, and it reduces unnecessary stitching and helps eliminate bulk on the piece. And so this, on the Bernina, it's pretty easy. There's the little setup gears button that is on your machine. For those of you with a 5 series, you are going to go to your home button and the gears are at the bottom of your screen. But on the 7 and 8 series machines, the gears are on the side on those dark buttons. So you hit the gear, then there's a little eye that you touch, and that indicates that that's your sensor. So once you select that, you have like 3 places where you can shut the eye. This spool of thread represents the upper thread, the bobbin represents the bobbin, and this represents a little thing where the machine can kind of sense if the tension is too loose. So we just want to turn all of those sensors off, and a red circle means it's off and a green line means it's on. And we just need to do this for that first color recommendation in the stitch and flip block. So after you have finished that, make sure you go back here and turn your sensors back on. So the practice block, there it is. It is design 1237601, and the colors are it's all going to be the same thread. And in the top and bottom, and it's your construction thread, your cotton thread that you would use for piecing. Now remember, no thread for the color number 1. But the general stitch and flip instructions for 1 5.5 inch square. So in our first exercise, which we're going to do in just a moment, we are going to deviate a little bit, like I warned you from the OESD instructions. So we do not use the fusible interfacing, but we do press between flips. You could also use a seam roller or finger pressing tool, but I found that the fusible stabilizer left too many wrinkles when we added embroidery on the top of the block for this project. And I just use a water-soluble glue stick to hold some of the flipped pieces into place. And I like the Bowen glue sticks, and I like the sew-lined ones. I think in the video that we're going to watch and do, I'm using a one of those purple Elmer's water-soluble glue sticks. Those work too. So you don't need to get too fastidious over your glue stick as long as it's water-soluble. So we're going to need to cut. Let's cut, we all have some extra fabric in our stash that we're like, why do I have this? So you might want to use that just to kind of get the hang of this. You can use the photo to the left as reference, and I have some cutting instructions there for you. So the dark purple is going to be a 3-inch square, and that little square with a line going through it, that represents that once you cut that square, you're going to cut it in half on the diagonal. And then you're going to need a 2 3/4 inch by 8 inch strip. Then with the white, we need a 3 by 3.5 inch piece. And then there's light lilac, which is a 3 inch by 4.5 piece and a 3-inch square cut in half on the diagonal. And then the dark lilac is 3 by 4.5. So just cut those up, and then we're going to hoop up our stabilizer in the hoop and start our general stitch and flip instructions. So let's go on over to the machine and make this happen.
All right, are you ready to learn what stitch and flip is? I know you are. So as you can see here, I've got some thread through my needle. So we're going to perforate this with our color number 1. We have our block loaded up that you saw in the presentation. So now all I'm going to do is just unthread my machine. And now out comes the thread. And now simply we are going to stitch color number 1. Now, when we did this because the pattern or the embroidery design calls for you to actually use thread in here. But what happens is sometimes that makes it harder to rip all the stabilizer out, in my opinion. So I just did the perforation. So now I'm just going to turn that thread sensor back on. And I'm going to thread the needle with white or a fill thread, 50 weight, which is what I also have in the bobbin. And the first piece that's going to go on is this little white piece here in the center. Now, I want you to know I'm not using any fabrics from my embroidery sampler kit. I just grabbed some things from my stash. I just wanted you to see the stitch and flip technique. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and stitch color number 2. And just a little FYI, when I'm using an 880, I like to hold my threads when I get started just a little bit, because the 880 is going to cut the tail. So now we're going to cut 1/4 inch away from this line with your favorite little snippy scissors that can get in there to the hoop to do the cutting. And now we're going to line up another piece here, and this is our little gray piece. And now this is the flip portion of stitch and flip. I have flipped this over. I'm finger pressing into position. And now I've got another piece to do on the other side, but we're gonna let our machine tell us where it needs to stitch it. So now it's gonna stitch the line exactly where we need to place the next piece down. So now we're going to trim this bit away 1/4 inch. And we're going to leave this into position here. And now we're going to flip this over. Finger press, get everything into position. And now our next piece should be the bottom of the triangle. So here's one of my triangle pieces that I'm going to cover right here. And this is a little bit more than 1/4 inch, so I'm just going to sneak through here and trim off just a little bit. Would I really need to trim this off? No, I could probably just leave it. I need bigger scissors though. All right, I have to bring out the reserves here, my little applique duckbill scissors, which are, well, quite frankly, that's what these are designed to cut. There we go. It's a little jaggedy, but it's our practice block. All right, so we're gonna line this down just there like that, and now we're gonna press this one, get it started. And I like to use just a little bit of glue to get things to lay flat here. This is just a fabric glue stick. Do the same thing here, just a little bit. There we go. All right. So now the next color is going to stitch. It's color number 8. And basically this is just going to hold this piece down into position. And then it's giving us a placement line for our long piece. So out come the applique scissors. And we're just going to trim. There we go. And now we have this long piece that we're going to put down and have it stitch. All right, so now I'm going to just take a little bit of the glue and put there, flip, and then stitch another line of stitching. And this is color number 10. And now that looks pretty straight, so I'm just going to leave my next piece into position just there. And now stitching color number 11. And now I'm going to remove the hoop, but leave all the stuff in it and just press this at the Laura Star really quick. All right, so I'm just going to take my iron and press these pieces so they're nice and flat, because my next piece is going to be a square outline that's going to hold down all these pieces into position. And you can see our piece on the back. All right, let's go back to the machine. And that is stitch and flip. But wait, there's more.
So you're not going to take this out of the hoop. You're going to leave it as is, and we're going to add the embroidery. So there are our Divine Flowers and Vines. The Sewing Guide to the Divines CD has instructions in the guide for cutting, like I mentioned, and they use the areas in maroon that are going to be clipped, like you see in our illustration there to the right. Now, there are a lot of other vines and designs like this on the Divine Vine CD. So for block 1, we are simply working with 2 designs. The one that you see there on the right, and then eventually another one that's just a flower. But the block 1, and remember, this is our practice piece, so you can kind of play around and see what you want to do. We've already stitched and flipped the block from the piece to perfection, but we're going to add the BE110203, that vine piece, and we're going to be working right in our machine. So we're going to pull that design in, and you know, honestly, I want you to keep that stitch and flip file open. So instead of picking a new design, we are actually going to add a design so that we know exactly where we're going to be placing it in relation to the block and designing it. So let's go ahead with that one highlighted. You can see right there that it's in full color, and our pieced block looks a little grayed out. And we are going to hit the rotate button, that's the circle icon, and we are going to use our top knob to rotate it minus 28 degrees. Then we're going to activate the move icon, those are the crosses, and we're going to position that to the bottom. We're going to position the bottom right stem onto the bottom right of the stitch and flipped block. The design is a 3-color stitch out, and once it's stitched out, one of the 16 units is made. Now in this case, it's our little practice block. So once we've done this and you've stitched out your practice block and you like it, we can actually get ready to make our real block. And that is the most exciting part, right? Nobody likes to practice. Everybody wants to be an expert from the beginning. But
yay, it's time to grab our 3 colors that we're using and thread up the machine. So I'm going to change my bobbin to my embroidery bobbin fill, which is the white bobbin fill. I'm going to place that in there like that. We're going to run this through so it goes in that little groove, and now we're going to thread this for embroidery. So I like to just take my finger and push that back. I can feel it click. Then we're going to bring that down the ski slope to get it into that spot and cut. See that thing that it's doing right there? That is unique to the Bernina machines. That is called thread away mode, and what that does is it prevents a bunch of little hairy things, little threads from sticking up in the top here, and it just pulls the thread underneath and wipes it away. Sometimes in this course of these videos I'm going to have you turn that off, but for this project it's fine. And I'm not sure that thread away is turned on your machines by default, but all you have to do is go into your settings, hit the embroidery hoop, and then you see that little wiggly needle right there. You click that, and then that's where you can turn it on, or subsequently turn it off if you needed to.
we are ready to do block 1. So let's just have a little refresher. This is block 1. I call it the teal one, and you can see there are little vines and our 16 blocks. Now there is my finished quilted block that you're looking at, but it all starts somewhere, right? So let's talk about the fabric and the thread choices. So the thread, first of all, that we're using, there's like this bright fuchsia. There's a darker dusty like rose or misty rose, and then there's like this green. Well, they actually have thread color numbers. It's 2732 in Frosted Orchid, 2762 in Misty Rose, and 5542 in Garden Moss. The fabrics that we're using are from Pure Solids from Art Gallery Fabrics. Their solids are just impeccable. We love them. We're using Periwinkle, which is 529, Tranquil Waters 434, and Tile Blue 418. We also are using Kona Premium Muslin in Optic White, and that is going to be kind of a standard throughout the whole quilt. I really liked using a white fabric in this. At the end of the day, it's going to look really cool when we sash this and everything. But those are the 4 that you're going to pull out of your kit. And then you're going to cut them. And I know you know how to do this because we cut for 1 block in our practice piece, but this time we're going to have to cut a few more squares because ultimately we are making 16 of these. So that requires that you cut 8 from the white, you cut 8 3-inch squares, cut on the diagonal, then you're going to cut 16 3 by 3.5 inches, 32 3 by 4.5 inches of the Tranquil Waters. The Periwinkle gets 16 3 by 8 inches, and Tile Blue gets 8 3-inch squares cut in half on the diagonal. And don't forget that this handout with all of these instructions will be available to you. You will download this via email in a link that I send you once you sign up for the class.
If you have an 880 plus and you have the jumbo hoop, I highly recommend using it to build your blocks each month because 2 blocks will fit really nicely in the jumbo hoop. You can also fit 2 blocks in the maxi hoop, just so you know.
And this also will come in handy when you want to do the quilting if you don't want to hoop up as much. So what I'm going to do is I have the medium tear weight stabilizer here, and you're going to need 8 of these if you're doing it in the hoop like I am, because there are 16 blocks that make up each of your blocks, and you can do 2 at a time, so half of 16 is 8. If you are doing the large oval or a midi hoop or something like that, then you're going to need 16 pieces that fit in the hoop that you choose to use. Now, it's only 1 layer. So here I go. I'm going to take my jumbo hoop. Look how dirty it is. Look how dusty that thing is. You can tell I've been using it a lot. So I'm just going to slip this in here, and we're going to squeeze this right into the hoop, and we're going to take this over to my Bernina 880 Plus. Once you have your finished block and we're ready to actually do our 16 blocks for this, it is okay to go over into our little I button and make a duplicate, and then move 1 up to the top of the hoop and 1 up to the bottom of the hoop. And by playing around a little bit with the resequencing, what I mean is I need to kind of plan the most effective way to stitch this out. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay and get ready to stitch. So here I am in the stitching screen. This time there are 2 of them, like you can obviously see. But if we click our little resequencing button, that's this red, yellow, red button here. On some of the models you might have to press and drag to find it down here. On the 5 series and the 770 machines with the smaller touch screens, you have to kind of scroll down to find that. But we're going to select that, and now it's going to stitch all of the colors together. Now, I have to tell you something. I kind of like to do color number 1 all at the same time, so that it does that perforation, but then I'll come back and take the resequencing off and then do each block on its own. You could do 2 blocks together all at the same time, but I'll stitch and flip block 1 and then stitch and flip block 2. Then I'll hit my resequencing button again, then scroll down to find the first color of my embroidery and do those. And now, on a side note, what I want to talk to you about is changing the colors of your threads. So now it's kind of important that we're going to have the right colors here. So that's when we want to go up and pick like this color. Let's go back to our little thread palette. That's right here. And if we select color number 9, that's going to be our Misty Rose. So we're going to go over here to our little recycle button. It's in the isochord, and Misty Rose is color 2762. And then we select it. Then we're going to go back to our palette here and pick color number 10 in this situation, but we really want to pay attention to the actual color that's showing up here on the screen, and that is Frosted Orchid, which is color number 2732. So we're going to touch that one that we want to change. It's still isochord, hit our search, and pick 2732. And select that one, go back to our artist palette at the breadcrumbs there, and then we have one last color. That's the Garden Moss, and that is 5542. And now that we have completed that, we can go back to our sewing screen, and now we can see that indeed these are in the correct color. So, are you ready for this? Let's give it a try. It's pretty simple, just like we did on our practice block. We just want to keep stitching and flipping and add those registration lines, then flip, use the glue when you need to, and trim in. One thing I wanted to make sure you understood is that you can remove the hoop to, get in there and trim better.
But another thing too that I'm not doing in this demonstration is I should have pressed before I did that last square. So be sure that you do that. It'll look much prettier when you do your embroidery. And press my thread sequencing button and scroll until I see that first color of my vine embroidery, which on my machine is coming up as color number 9 with the stitch sequencing selected. So this is going to be fun. It's not that exciting. I'm going to go ahead and just speed it up here so that you can see the stitch out. I wanted to have a little chat about the raised look on this flower. Now these Divine Vines embroidery designs that we're working with this project, these are actually tufted and they're meant to be cut. Now you can cut them or not cut them. I'm going to show you, I think I am going to trim mine, so I'm going to show you how to do that when the block is totally complete. But I just wanted to point out that this stitching time might be a little bit longer because it keeps putting raised stitching in there until, you know, it creates that beautiful tuft there. Okay, so the design has stitched out and it's time to trim. You can see that there is a little thread design here. So the way that I made this is I went ahead and just trimmed right on that line. So I use a rotary cutter and ruler to do this. And then you would do the other one just the same. Now, one thing I want to point out, remember how I had given you the advice to do your first round, like your placement line of no thread, but you can see here that I do have thread in there. Well, honestly, learn from my my exploration here, because this actually makes it harder to remove the stabilizer. So if you just do a ghost run on that, you can easily pull the stabilizer off. But since, you know, I did quite a few where I did the stitching, and I put the stitching in there so that you could kind of see it when I was placing it in the video, I just kind of go through and I just trim just the stabilizer only, those initial little stitches there, and then I can just peel off the stabilizer like that. And then I'm going to just give a little tug and I tear into these pieces just like this, so that I can get the stabilizer all of the way off of there. And see how that like hangs out on that little thread? You want to trim that just like that. Okay, so just do everything like this, and then no steam iron please with these. We're going to press these without steam. But that's how you're going to take your stabilizer off. And then obviously trim any little weird loosey-goosey threads on the back there. Okay, so here are some stages. So we're going to sew these into 4 patches like this. So it starts by taking one of these pieces and we're going to arrange them like this. You can see that in your handout. And then we're going to put, so we're going to start by sewing 2 sets together like this. So this one to this one, and I use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And one of the tricks that I like to do to match up my seams is align them up together like this and put a pin through like this intersection right there and that intersection right there, and then let that kind of hang out there like that to make sure that they're lined up. Then you can come with your pin and go straight across the street and line that up. So we're going to sew. Don't worry that your little vine is going to get caught in your seam allowance. That's fine. And then you're also going to make sure that that intersection is lining up down there. So we're just going to stitch that. And then once that is done, you're going to open it up and press your seams open. And if you look here, you can see I pressed my seams open. So you want to do the same thing. And then when you sew your 2 pieces together, you're going to line everything up. And look, don't even get too worked up. See how mine's not perfect? When all of these get together, you're not going to be looking at that one little piece there. But anyway, so you're going to line them up as much as you can. And then you're going to have a piece like this. So this is made up of 4 of the pieces. So then we're going to sew those pieces together to form this. We're going to make 2 of these, and then we'll sew these 2 pieces together. and we'll have something that's really pretty. We're almost there. I just need to do some sewing, and I need to free my last two pieces there so that I can sew these in. Okay, I got it all together. I think it looks pretty gosh darn good. Now, the only thing I have to say is I think it needs a little extra. Now, of course, we are going to layer this together with our warm and natural batting and then a backing piece. However, I want to do one more embroidered thing before it's quilted, and that is in your little divine flowers and vines. You have this design, this puffy little flower like this. It's its own design. So I'm going to embroider this 4 times. Here, here, there, and there. And then I think I'm going to be totally ready to quilt it. So look, I've hooped up 1 layer of the heavyweight or the medium weight tearaway in my medium hoop. And I picked just a single flower design from our Divine Flowers and Vines. So now, as I get ready to put this hoop in place, I'm just going to baste my quilt block into position and do each flower individually. So I've threaded up my purple thread. There it is. So that's in the machine, and now I'm just going to grab my block. So I've got my needle kind of lined up in the center, and that's sort of, I mean, I really do think that's where I want this design. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch it out and add a basting feature around it. Okay, so now I'm just going to kind of gently hold this while this base into position. And now, I don't really care if it's centered or whatever at this point. I'm just using this to sew it to the hoop. But now, I'm going to go to my machine and go back to my editing field. I'm going to use my pinpoint placement because why not? And I'm going to put my needle right into the center of the flower. Now, that center should be that intersection right there. So I'm going to lower my foot and just kind of move right into the center. Ooh, I like that a lot. So now I'm going to set. We're going to stitch this out. Okay, so these tufts, I'm going to go ahead and cut these before we quilt them, but see that? That's all we're doing. Now you could probably take like a craft knife or an X-Acto knife, but I have these really sharp little snips. These are Tula Pink serrated snips that I'm using, and they're doing a pretty good job of just sneaking here in the middle, and cutting these little threads right down the middle. So they create this kind of chenille look. Just like that. So there's our little tuft, matches that one. So you're just going to do this on, I'm not going to do the leaves in this scenario. I'm going to leave the leaves on this one, but do you see how that's got the little jaggedy bit there? I could also trim down those, but I'm just going to trim the fuchsia color this month. Right, so there we have a fluffy flower. And, you know, just to make it extra, maybe at the end, I'll put little gemstones when I'm totally done. I don't know. You know, I'm way more ambitious when I start a project than when I end one. Now it's time to put on our gloves. So I've got these Reggie's gloves. These are what I really prefer for machine quilting because these little rubber grippies can kind of grab on to what we need. And my Bernina stitch regulator. Now for your benefit, so you can kind of see what we're doing, I have put the open toe sole on here, but the Bernina stitch regulator foot comes with a clear plastic sole and then a closed toe sole for darning, but we're going to use the open toe one. Also, I have threaded in my machine Sarah Lean thread by Metler. It is a 60 weight thread, very fine, and I'm going to be using this thread for all of the quilting on our embroidery sampler project. So blocks 1 through 9, I'm going to use this when we do the quilting. When you put on your Bernina stitch regulator foot, you're going to put the cone over that little hole there, and you can see how this part of the foot kind of sits to the back like that. Then you pull down your little lever and this plugs into like a little headphone jack in the back of the machine right there. So I'm just gonna feel for that little hole and plug this in. Now, once it's plugged in, your actual machine screen changes. You can see here, it's already knows that the stitch regulator foot's on when I plugged it in. Here's the bird's eye view. Now, you're not really going to be able to see the open toe version of the foot, but we can do stitch regulator in straight stitch or zigzag, and we have 2 modes. Expert mode is what I call number 1, and number 2 is a little bit easier mode. Now, the way that this works is mode number 1, the needle is going to rhythmically go up and down so that if you need to knot your stitches at the beginning and the end, you can kind of slowly hold your work in place and it will knot. Mode 2, when you stop moving your hands, the machine is going to stop moving. So sometimes if you have a little bit of trepidation, that one could be a better choice. And then you can activate and deactivate the stitch regulator right here. When you press that, basically it's just like a regular darning foot, but we want to make sure that this is selected with that little ring around it. So now I also might want to change my stitch length. I'm going to go to like 1.8 or 1.75 right here on my stitch length because I'm going to do some small stippling in the white areas of my block. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, if you can look here and see my stitching in the white area of this quilt, I'm doing stippling. I'm also doing stippling in the lighter blue area. And then after we do our stippling, we're going to come back and do some ruler work with straight lines. And so I thought this would give this just a nice texture on the background with our vines and everything. So let's think about the path that we want to take for our stippling. So I just did a little bit before I sat down here to show you how to do this, just so we can get kind of, you know, an idea of what's going on here. But I'm going to start and go through my light blue areas around in here. Then I can kind of travel like right through that spot here and go all the way around, then come back, then go through here. And then I can just travel through my little seams like this until I have everything stippled. Then I can come back and do my straight line quilting with my ruler work and ruler. And we're gonna learn how to do both of these for this month's exercise. Before you get started, unless you have a little bit of experience with stippling, you may wanna just try to have your hand tell your brain what you might think a good stippling is. Now, typically stippling, when you're practicing, you start off with something like just a little wiggle like that. But then, as you get more comfortable with a wiggle, you can maybe go sideways and come down like this. Or then, once you're comfortable with that, you can go up over, around, down, and then all of a sudden it turns in to kind of this little wormy tunnel looking kind of stitch. Some people might describe it as puzzle pieces that look kind of connected together. But then the idea is as you do this, you don't want to cross over, you don't want points, and you want the stipple to be fairly evenly distributed. There's also some other factors, and that is ending where you start. That takes a lot of skill. Now, with what we're doing, we're not really going to need to end where we start per se, because I'm going to be traveling through some different corners in the quilt blocks and everything. So, but basically, you want to try to create something like this with the needle and the machine. So I've done this quite a bit, so I feel very comfortable taking off and doing this particular block this way, but you might want to have some extra fabric and batting sandwiched together, much like we have ours done here, like this, and you can practice some stippling. Now, sometimes stippling is even smaller than this. This is kind of like when you really think of stippling, and when we talk about micro stippling, that's where our little designs are really tiny. And then the closer together your stippling is, the shorter your stitch length needs to be. And so that's why I adjusted the stitch length of my stipple stitch, because I'm going to try to go a little bit smaller on my stippling than normal. And going to that short stitch length helps keep your little rounded bits rounder. Otherwise, the machine can start to feel a little jerky if your stitch length is too long. So let's go ahead and give this a try on our machine. When you start with machine quilting, there's a few things that you want to do. You're going to take your top thread and pull that with your left hand and your index finger and thumb. And I'm going to start, I just told you I was going to start over here, like right in this corner, just like this, right up here. And then I'm going to put my heel down to put my needle into position, and I'm going to heel tap to bring my needle up. Then if I want, I can use my freehand system to raise my presser foot and pull that bobbin thread up just there. So now I have two threads that I'm holding right in front of me here, and now I'm going to lower my presser foot again, and now I'm going to press the presser foot. And see how it's rhythmically going up and down, but not really fast until I start moving the machine? That's because I'm in that expert mode. But now I'm going to be doing my little stipples, doing my little curlicues, and just trying to make something really pretty. And sometimes I'm really kind of feeling like I'm using my fingertips more than I am anything else. And that's where these little gloves come in handy. And if you need to, take a break, you stop, you let your needle land in the down position, and you reposition your hands. Okay, so you just want to carefully just manipulate yourself around your different designs. And if your machine beeps at you, well, that is your machine warning you that you might be going a little too fast. So you have to slow down a little bit. But you can see here, if I zoom out a little bit, I've done like this area here. I'm going to go up here and then come down through here. And I'm even going to sneak in under these little vines here like this, just to make sure that I get everything nicely nicely stitched. Okay, so I've done this area up here, and now I'm traveling down into a new area here. So I'm just gonna keep moseying along. Okay, the feed dogs have been dropped. I've changed my foot out now. This is the new number 72S foot with that little slit right there, and that allows me to just slip my thread right in through that little slot. And now, if you look over here on this part of my quilt, I did some straight line ruler work quilting. Now, this is a 1/2 inch from this stitching to this stitching and that stitching to that stitching. So basically, I'm going to use this line right here. This is a 1/4 inch, so a 1/4 inch plus the 1/4 inch from the side of the foot to the needle equals 1/2 inch. But the first thing I want to do is stitch right down the middle of the seam here, because that is actually going to be a little reference line for me. So I've got to get my needle down into my material and bring it up, and then pull my thread. There we go. And now I'm just going to carefully hold this ruler along the side of my foot. I'm going to lower the foot. There we go. Move it into position. And now I'm just going to stitch right down this middle piece here. I don't have my gloves on. Normally I would have my gloves on for this. I just forgot to put them on. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hold this ruler firmly, and I'm stitching right in that little ditch there like that. So I'm going to do a few stitches in place, but now I'm going to just gently encourage this forward. And then right as I get to the end, I got like a little bump there. I'm going to take a couple stitches and get right on that edge. So now I'm going to travel about the equivalent of a 1/2 inch over here, and I'm actually going to go around my little flower here like that. That might be about a 1/2 inch. Now remember, I've got to take this part of my ruler and line that up down the seam. And now I'm going to gently go backwards. And then I'm going to stop, admire my work, and then I'm going to hop like a 1/2 inch this direction. There we go. Line up my ruler on that 1/4 inch away from that line I just stitched, and come back down. And now just repeat and do the same thing. And sometimes you might overshoot it a little bit. It's okay to fix that. But look, there's our stitching. Now I'm going to come back down here, line it up, and go forward. And now I could travel over on this side and just finish this quadrant, or I could just go counterclockwise around my design. And now sometimes I'm going to tell you a little story. I actually end up stitching through some of my embroidery, but that's just what I'm going to do. Here we go. Okay, I got to that seam. I'm going to go up about, the equivalent of what 1/2 inch would be, and line up my ruler just how I made that seam before. And now here we go. We're going to gently go backwards. Just like that. And now hop on down again, getting it about a 1/2 inch away from that previous stitching line. Hop on up, and then go backwards. And I've got just a little tiny piece to do now. That looks great. All right, so now I am going to go down this direction here, and I can use my ruler as some assistance getting down there right on that line. Now, just to have some control, I'm gonna go up here through this little seam. This is that middle seam that we kind of gauge everything off of here. There we go. And now I'm gonna go this direction. Just hopping over about a 1/2 inch. There we go. And now do the same thing, about a 1/2 inch. Half an inch. Come down, over, and about a 1/2 inch. Now I'm going to go over and do the other side. But I'm going to try to circumvent my flower there just a little bit, get it over here about like that. Okay, so now I'm going to go forward. Hop up, backwards, over, down. And now we're going to do the same thing on this other side that we did. And this is about the right direction. So I'm going to go all the way back through this one, because this one we're going to go vertically. There we go. I like it. Now we're going to go down here, line up our ruler. And now go back this way. I overshot it, so I have to come back down a little. There we go. Now we go like this. Come back down. Come back down. Come back down. Just a little bit there. And now we're going to go up in this direction and finish this last little piece on this quadrant. Okay. Okay, so now that one's done, and I just have one more to do, and we can look at the quilting when I'm done. Okay, so here's our block. I think it came out looking super cute. Can't wait to make the next one and the one after that and everything. But I do want to address a little something. So when I was doing the stippling on here, I have to tell you, I struggled with finding just the right needle with the cerulean thread. So I wanted to pass this advice on to you. I ended up with a 90 quilting needle. There's a lot of seams in there, but initially I thought I'd need like a size 80 or 75 because the thread was so fine. But I went up to a heavier needle. Then I also made sure that my machine was oiled and cleaned. And then it worked just like a charm. Also, a best practice would be, now I did all my stippling, then I came back in and I did the ruler work. It made for a better video. But when you are actually doing this, I want you to consider potentially doing one of these blocks and stipple, then doing your ruler work, then coming back and doing more stipple. And work in quadrants. That's going to prevent little areas like this where you get some puckering. And that's just because I did a lot of stippling and it squeezed up that batting, and then I had like too much puff in here. So just keep that in mind. Now I'm happy with mine. You know, I don't really go for museum quality quilts here. I like and enjoy the process, and I also like you guys to learn from the mistakes that I make or ways that I could make mine better. But I think if you consider those little tips, you're gonna really, really be happy with your finished product. maybe even happier than I am with mine.
Here's my little practice piece in case you were wondering what the whole thing looked like, but who's ready to sew along with me? Come on, I don't want to get lonely. I want to have some like friends visiting here on that third Saturday of the month from 9 until 11. That's right, they're in-person sessions for this. So the way that this is going to work is we will premiere this video once a month, and then after the video premiere, the third Saturday of the month from 9 until 11, we will have an opportunity for you to come into the store and ask questions, and I'll do a presentation, talk a little bit about the video, do some hands-on things and stuff like that. Now, if you can't make it to the hands-on sessions, even if you live around here, don't worry about that. That's why we do the video. That's why you can always email us at orders@BERNINAofNaperville.com. And hopefully, you know, either way, if you want to do it virtually or hands-on or do a combination of both, it'll work out for you. Don't forget to visit BERNINAofNaperville.com right on our homepage to sign up for Embroidery Sampler Too. You can also do that in a link in this video. You can even click the link in the description of this video. So I hope you join us. If you like this tutorial and you want to see others like it, check out our Bernina of Naperville YouTube channel. It's easy. It's youtube.com/Bernina of Naperville, and there you can like, comment, and subscribe.